Morning. Today is Wednesday, July 26th. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. There are 4 cases on the agenda today. We do have a quorum present, and Mr. Penaranda is attending virtually. The first case on the agenda is RPC 1702503H on North Oak Street. That case was asked to be withdrawn. I assume, Deidre, that there's no objection from the county?
No objection from the county.
Okay, so I will move to accept the withdrawal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye. Oppose? Okay, it's unanimous. So that case is withdrawn. The next case on the agenda is RPC 1000130G on Washington Boulevard. Let the record reflect that Mr. Lawson has a conflict, so he will be recused from this case, but there is a quorum with the remaining members. So, Ms. Foreman, I don't know whether you or Mr. Harmon are going to speak, but you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, members of the county. Good morning. I hope everyone is well and had a restorative off season. Happy to see everyone back. And with that, I'll get right into it. So this is the Westover Shopping Center. We heard this case last year where we argued that 2 parcels that make up part of the parking lot were being double taxed. Now that the DREA did argue against that logic. Now the 2023 assessment does correct this error. And it's our understanding that the DREA will make an own motion to reduce prior year's assessments by some portion of this year's reduction to partially correct the double taxation in prior years. If there's more detail necessary on that, I'll let the DREA explain that. So knowing that those 2 parcels have been adjusted on the 2023 assessment, if we adjust the 2022 final value set by the board to account for this same adjustment to those 2 parcels, so we can have an apples to apples comparison of assessments, we see that the 2023 assessment increased by 8% over the value set last year. This is despite the fact that NOI decreased year over year at the property. So there's 2 issues on appeal today: the potential rental income and the operating expenses. Column F on the DREA test page is a recreation of our submitted stabilized potential. You can see the difference in value on potential rental income is based on the leased retail income. We pulled the income directly from the contracts in place as of the date of value to develop our rental rate. The DREA did not provide a rent roll with their analysis, so I'm not aware of how they arrived at their increased retail rental potential. Now, the main issue on appeal is the operating expenses imputed by the assessment. At the hearing last year, the board set the operating expenses at $5.34 per square foot based on the operating history of the property. This rate is justified again this year as operating expenses increased year over year. The assessment imputes operating expenses at only $3.76 per square foot. That's nearly 31% lower than what the property incurred in 2022. Now, if we're looking at the operating history of this property, we see that operating expenses were $543 in 2022, $534 per square foot in 2021, and $531 in 2019, for an average across these 3 years of $5.36 per square foot. Now, I'll note that 2020 operating expenses were artificially low due to the COVID pandemic shutdowns and restrictions, which severely limited the use of this property by the tenants. So 2020 operating expenses, you can see, are an outlier. For that reason, I didn't include them, but the 3-year average of 2019, 2021, and 2022 is $5.36 per square foot. So we have 3 years of operating expenses at that level. And again, the assessment's only at $3.76 per square foot. No potential purchaser would impute operating expenses at a rate 31% lower than what the prior year experienced, especially given the inflation present in the market as of the date of value. The Arlington Economic Development's third quarter 2022 report showed inflation was 6.5% at that time. What we've done on our stabilized potential column is we conservatively grew the 2022 actual operating expenses by 5% to reflect the anticipated increase due to inflation. As such, we respectfully request the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Again, we're discussing the Westover Shopping Center located right off Washington Boulevard. It has roughly about 43,897 square feet of net leasable area. With the largest tenant, U.S. Postal Service. First in, one of the tenants vacated the premises last year in June, and the lease was replaced with the new tenant, which is Westover Taco. As board recalls, this case was called, it was presented to you last year, and the argument was that the adjacent standalone parcel ending with 007, which includes the part of the parking lot dedicated to Westover Shopping Center, was being double taxed. We have rectified the issue. We included this parcel just recently in the total economic unit. There was another parcel mentioned this year, and the appellant's right up the parcel ending 006. That parcel was not argued last year, but it has been mentioned this year, even though the appeal hasn't been filed. This is another adjacent standalone parcel, but it includes the single-family residential and the part of the parking lot that is also dedicated to the Westover Shopping Center. Now, we couldn't apply the same treatment to this parcel. We couldn't include it in the commercial unit because it's on R6 and it's appraised by the residential team. But we did recognize there was an issue of partial double taxation. So Laurie Roskin collaborated with residential team to address the issue. And what we did, we used the pictometry to approximate the square footage of the lot that should be allocated to the commercial unit. That's why on the summary sheet, you can see the below line adjustment of $412,600. So again, Laurie Roskin collaborated with residential team. If you have any questions particularly to this parcel, she'll be more than happy to answer your questions after I'm done with my presentation. We have also analyzed the provided IMEs for years 2019, 2022. We do acknowledge that our operating expenses that we used for 2023 valuations are below the expenses reported by the appellant on the 2022 IME. However, we asked the court to focus on the bottom line, look at the NOI we used in our valuation, and look at the NOI reported by the appellants for the past 2 years. Our NOI is significantly below the NOI they reported. It is even significantly below the NOI they used in their pro forma for 2023. So we asked the board not to ignore that fact. Now this year, the reason the appellants are contesting the assessment is, again, operating expenses and the cap rate. The appellants used a 10-year treasury bill as the grounds for the cap rate argument. I'll be referring to it as 10-year treasury note because that's what it is. It's not a treasury bill. So they stated the rate the treasury year note was going for as of December 30th, 2022, which was at 3.88%. Now they failed to acknowledge that this is a fluctuating rate. They didn't mention that as of January 31, it was going for 1.79%. And as of June 30th, it was going at 2.98%. Also note that as of December 31st, 2021, the 10-year note was only at 1.52%. And by applying the methodology of the appellant, you would think that our cap rate should be significantly decreased, but we didn't decrease the cap rates at that time. This is not how mass appraisal works, selecting one day in the year, basing our assessment on what the 10-year treasury note was going for, and ignoring the rest of the year, ignoring the sales data, ignoring the hundreds of IMEs we have analyzed, would be just reckless and unacceptable. And we also appreciate the appellant's comment that it is counterintuitive, quote unquote, to think that the return on 10-year treasury note, which is the risk-free investment, which is also arguable, it's not a risk-free. So in our cap rate wasn't increased. In the 2023 Board of Equalization book, which the board received weeks ago, they also bring up the increased cost of borrowing issue. Well, now, they bring SOFR rates on the page 5, but when you look at SOFR rates and LIBOR rates, undeniably you can conclude that the cost of borrowing did increase. However, if you wanted to make it a compelling argument, you would show us how your client was impacted by this changing condition. They failed to provide any evidence. They didn't explain how the client was impacted. They omitted the long section on the INE survey where we asked the appellants to use loan information in place. They didn't provide that information. If I was an agent, if I wanted to make it a compelling argument, I would explain. For example, they took out the loan 3 years ago at 3%, and it reset. It was a floating rate. It reset, let's say, at 8%. I would share that information. Or I don't know, they just took recently loan at 9% because they need to take care of some major repairs. They should mention that too. We gave them opportunities to do so. They didn't do it. They skipped that section. And if I was an agent, the only reason why I would skip that section was either I was too busy and I didn't fill it out, which would really make a disservice to my client. Number 2, if there was simply no loan in place, well, if that's the case, they wouldn't have merit in this argument. And the number 3, they took out loan recently, but the appraisal attached to it produced higher value than our assessment. And I wouldn't mention it either. So I have several cases with Wilkes and Arthur. They copied and pasted the same cap rate argument into every single case. And just in this case, they didn't fill out the loan application, neither in other cases. They just skipped it.
Thank you both. Any questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
To the department, normally, question. Is it true that normally you take vacancy and collection rates from the guidelines? And if there's some extraordinarily high vacancy rate, you look at the trend, but otherwise, if it's very low or non-existent, okay. And that's what you've done here, 13% neighborhood centers. And I'm asking this because you referred to the NOI as being consistent with prior years and future estimates. But it seems, my question is, given that it's normal for you to take under these normal circumstances, the standard guideline vacancy rates, it seems that you upset that because you really didn't have 13% vacancy. This is being tortured, I'm so sorry. But lower than, therefore, the operating expenses below what they have been experiencing. This is a very, very stabilized property, for sure, other than the parcels that come in and out every year. So is that what you did in order to get the NOI to be consistent?
And Mr. Matzkin, if I may address that as well. Couple of points there. The DREA guidelines state that vacancy and collection loss rate includes vacancy, rent loss, and rent concessions. So it's not just a flat vacancy loss rate. It accounts for any future potential of that. Now, it's important to note that Virginia law requires generally accepted appraisal practice be applied to assessments. Generally accepted appraisal practice does require a uniform market vacancy and collection rate be applied. The DREA has told us for this property type, that market rate is 13%. So they're required by law to apply that. It's a uniformity issue as well. To say that because it's 100% lease, there's going to be no vacancy loss, no rent loss, no concessions. And so we're going to knock down operating expenses. That's not how a market participant would value this property. They would not impute operating expenses at $3. Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, Jordan, the pro forma 23 NOI, is that factoring in the rent abatement for the new tenant?
That does not.
Okay.
Anything else? No, okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, again, by including parcel ending with 007 to the total of economic units and applying below the line adjustment of $412,600, we believe we have addressed the issue of double taxation. We ask the board to pay attention to the NOI we used in 2023 valuation and compare it to the last 2 years of NOIs reported by the appellants. With that being said, I ask the board to confirm the subject's 2023 assessment at $16,544,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just to summarize, we have the assessment increased by 8% if we stabilize the 2022 assessment for the double taxation that the county used this year to adjust that. So assessment increased 8% while NOI is decreasing. The DREA did not address why their retail rental rate is higher than what's listed on the 1231 rent roll. We use the actual rents in place as of the date of value. For operating expenses, that's the big issue. Again, it's $5.36 per square foot over the past 3 stable years. We grew the 2022 rate by 5% as a conservative estimate of the impact of inflation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, is there some on the board members?
I mean, the county definitely put in the work to fix the issue with the residential lot. So I think that's kind of behind us now, which is good.
Yeah.
And we reduced it last year and we're a little bit over the number from last year. I felt pretty comfortable with the number we were at before. We got a new 10-year lease. I wouldn't see like a $2 million reduction in value based on the changes year over year. So I'm not really seeing the argument there. And again, like Annetta was saying, like bottom line, NOI remarkably consistent, trending up slightly the last 3 years. So kind of feel like it'd be hard to reduce.
Right, I mean, I agree. I hear the appellant's argument that the expenses are low, which I would agree, but when you look at, so was the income. I mean, because when you look at the NOI speaks for itself. So I think, I can see why the county didn't do a test, so I'm fine with the assessment. Go ahead.
Why do you say the income is low relative to what?
Well, relative to, I'm sorry, the NOI is low.
It's a lot lower than last year.
Yeah.
They're using. That's why I thought maybe the pro forma for the appellant had the rent abatement.
Right.
For the new tenant in there. I'm not really sure.
Right, because if you look
How
at
you
the
get a lower
EGI
number?
that they're using, it's $1.3 million versus just made $1.5 million. So,
I understand and appreciate that. But why I asked my question the way I did up front, this 13%, everybody gets it unless they've got 50% vacancy. You get it whether you have 0 or 15, right?
Mhm.
Right. And of course I knew the answer, but I wanted to set up my logic, the logic, as the case may be, and that is that the operating expenses are the operating expenses. And to say, well, they have low vacancy and concessions historically, so we'll, then we'll just offset with something else. We'll just make it so that the bottom line, we know the answer, why. So we'll just kind of introduce numbers. I'm feeling uncomfortable with that.
right, but that being said, I still don't look at, if you look at the column D, if you were to increase the expenses, I mean, you're well below the 2021 and the 2022 income.
Well, what I did was I just arbitrarily took, added about $70,000 to expenses to make it about 200. I forget that, but about 235,000, whatever it is. And I did all the caps and the reduction and all of that stuff and came up with a number. I don't know if this is good or bad, but $15,585,000.
Right, and what's the NOI?
$1,599,000.
The NOI? Yeah,
I'm looking for my number. I'm sorry, $1,167,866.
which is well below
Below the historic.
3 years. That's why I get on board with some.
Maybe I'm just whining. I mean, it makes sense, which you agreed to, but I wanted.
No, if it wasn't for the fact that the numbers were lower than where they've been for 2 years, I'd be on board with you.
And look, if there was vacancy, they hadn't signed a lease in September to replace a tenant that was there before, then that would be another justification that we might trend it down for a couple of years.
Plus, if they find somebody, it's not so easy to find a retail.
Yeah.
Mark, where are you?
I'm
Ken?
fine.
Wait a minute, hold on.
I'm fine with where it's at.
Okay, Mr. Panoranda?
Yeah, I wanted to point out, Ken, on the summary sheet, the pro forma column, the appellant's numbers, I think, is miscalculated on the expenses because they're taking the 18% out of the total income, but they're not deducting the vacancy. So that number should be, instead of 250 some, it should be 195,791. And when I calculated the 18%, if we were to use on the assessment, it comes to about 198,000. So they're pretty close. And again, looking at the NOI, I'm pretty comfortable with the assessment the way it is. But if there was any adjustment to be made based on the expenses, I think the only increase that I would see is to increase the expenses to 18%, which would increase to, like I said, 198,042 instead of 165. That would lower the value by about $500,000 to $16,091,800. But yeah, I think the column is a little bit misleading because the number is incorrect.
All right, so can you live with the assessment?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
As is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and motion to accept the county's assessment of $16,544,000. Do I have a second? Mr. Yates is the second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 5-0 unanimous. The county's confirmed at $16,544,000. Thank you. If I saw Mr. Peralta.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next case on the agenda is RPC 140450002 at 4040 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to share my screen with some items included with the appeal just for emphasis. So this is 4040 Fairfax Drive. It's in Ballston at Fairfax and Randolph. It was built in 1966 and is assessed at an effective age of 1981. There's 3 issues on appeal. The assessment overstates income, understates expenses, but the main issue is the capitalization rate. The DREA assessed this property at a market capitalization rate of only 6%, as it has for each of the past 6 years. The cap rate the DREA shows on the test page in the board pack is made up of the market cap rate of 6% plus the tax rate of 1.2%. By choosing to leave the capitalization rate unchanged from the past 6 years, the DREA has ignored all factors that would either increase risk in the office market, decrease profitability in the market, or increase the required minimum return or opportunity cost of owning office buildings in the market. The DREA did make adjustments to the cap rate in the past to reflect market changes. In 2010, the DREA, then under the direction of Tommy Rice, increased the cap rate by 175 basis points to reflect the increased cost of capital and risk in the market at that time. For 2023, an appropriate cap rate adjustment is 200 basis points to reflect the increased opportunity cost and the increased risk present in the office market as of the date of value. Now, the minimum required return on office investments increased significantly over the course of 2022. This is because the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates more aggressively over the course of 2022 than it had at any time in recent history. The federal funds rate began increasing in March of 2022 and ultimately increased by 425 basis points over the course of the year. The 10-year T-bill increased by 236 basis points over the course of the year, with more rate increases known to be coming in the first half of 2023. This is important because the 10-year T-bill is commonly used as a proxy for the minimum required return for real estate investments. 236 basis points increase is higher than any other year in the past 50 years and significantly higher than the 160 basis point increase experienced in 2009 during the last financial crisis, at which time the DREA increased cap rates by 175 basis points the following year. If the risk-free rate increases by the highest rate in the past 50 years, the floor for risky office investments necessarily increases as well. We can see this in the data. You can see on the screen the relationship between the DREA cap rates and the 10-year T-bill. The red line is the base cap rate and the black line is the 10-year T-bill rate. The average spread over the past 15 years is 3.45%. The spread in 2023 is only 1.5%, nearly 200 basis points lower than the average and the lowest it's been at any point over the past 15 years. The increase in the opportunity cost is more significant than in 2010. Then again, the 10-year T-bill interest rates increased by 160 basis points, and the DREA increased cap rates by 175 basis points. Now we have a 236 basis point increase and no adjustment. Another component of the capitalization rate, the return on investment and the riskiness of the investment, have fundamentally shifted as of January 1, 2023, due to the institutionalization of hybrid work. Over the past 3 years, the United States has undergone a fundamental transformation in the way we work, and with that, the demand for office space has decreased drastically. To call work from home and hybrid work policies once in a lifetime is an understatement. This is more akin to the Industrial Revolution, a structural change in society with noted impacts on sectors, chief among them the office sector. As the DREA has told the board, the pandemic is over. COVID is over. It is time to assess office properties accordingly. This is now the 4th year in a row the DREA has assessed properties as though COVID-related work-from-home policies are only temporary and have no impact on office risk. Investors and owners knew hybrid work policies and reduced demand were here to stay as of the date of value. The stickiness of work-from-home and hybrid work policies has borne out over the past 3 years and was a known fact as of the date of value. Office demand was known to not be on the rebound to pre-pandemic levels. We can see this in the data. Vacancy and sublet space available have increased significantly. Net absorption has been negative each of the past 3 years. New leases are for smaller footprints on average than before the pandemic. Tenants are not physically using the office space they signed before the pandemic, signaling a likely decrease in the amount of space they retain upon expiration. New leases are for shorter terms and often include early termination options. Additionally, another 2.5 million square feet of new office was set to come online as of the date of value. The reduced demand has impacted not only occupancy, but also profitability. Again, we see this in the data. Rental rates have decreased across the board. Concessions have increased dramatically. Vacancy has increased. So the office market as of the date of value had dramatically reduced demand and lower net effective rents, both of which showed no signs of abating. Clearly, the office market was riskier and less profitable on the date of value 2023 than it was January 1, 2018, when the DREA last adjusted office cap rates. So where does this leave us? In addition to seeing the 10-year T-bill increase by 236 basis points over the course of 2022, again, with more increases known to be coming, we also looked at market sales that occurred most recently in the county. 5 sales that closed between October 2020 and February 2022. To update these sales to reflect the market as of the date of value, we employed a method used by Peter Korpex, the DREA's own outside expert. We contacted the parties to these sales and asked them to update their purchase or sale cap rate to reflect the market as of January 1, 2023. Each one of these parties indicated cap rates had increased from the time of sale to the date of value. The average increase from the sale to date of value was 154 basis points, and the average cap rate as of January 1, 2023 was 7.25%. Now, it's important to note that these 5 sales were some of the best tenanted buildings in the county. The average occupancy at the time of sale was 95%, with a weighted average lease term remaining of over 7 years. Additionally, many of the tenants were captive tenants due to the extensive build-out they had invested in the property. Many of these tenants also require in-office work due to the nature of their work. So the January 1 market cap rate for well-occupied buildings was 7.25%. The subject property, 1981 effective age, higher than market vacancy, is assessed at a market cap of only 6%, only 74% occupied, and a remaining WALT of 3.7 years. In addition to reduced demand and profitability, again, the supply of office space in the county is set to increase by 2.5 million square feet. Clearly, the office market is riskier than it has been at any time over the past 6 years. This was known. While hindsight is 2020, and we know today that properties are trading for double-digit cap rates, some as high as 14%. Knowing what we knew as of the date of value, a minimum of 200 basis points above the January 1, 2022 cap rate is appropriate. In closing, I want to state, Eileen and I have spent hundreds of hours researching the cap rate and the DREA guidelines. Put simply, the guidelines do not reflect the market as of the date of value and result in assessments greater than fair market value. This is evidenced by the first 2 sales that DREA references in the guidelines.
Okay, I need you to wrap up because you're.
I'm only able to provide so much information in these 8 minutes, but we're welcome to discuss any questions anybody may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
I'm actually going to speak for the first couple of minutes, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. So the office, the county is confident in the cap rate analysis conducted for the 2023 cap rates. As the agent stated, cap rates have remained consistent for 2021 through 2023, but they have been historically conservative. Each year, we conduct an annual internal cap rate analysis, which includes researching and analyzing market sales that are local sales, reviewing publications, and these publications are typically through third quarter of each year. We do have 6,300 parcels, so we do have to have a cutoff for our analysis. We do tend to look at sales through the end of the year, but we have to establish cap rates around that time frame. What we found was that office sales this year were pretty limited, but to account for the no change in the cap rates, we also look at each property individually when we that are under appeal. We are using a net effective rent. If you look at any of the cases that are coming before you, these are net effective rents that are applied, which is taking account all concessions that are, concessions that are being offered for these tenants. We are also using a higher TI rate than last year. Last year was $70, this year is $90. In addition to that, we're taking a below the line reduction, deduction for leasing commissions. So we are actually looking at what's happening in the market without making adjustments, going back, making adjustments to a cap rate that we feel confident in as of the date of the assessment. In addition to that, I just want to address the cap rate, the T-bill comment a little bit. The T-bill rate is a national rate. When we look at the market sales for our cap rate analysis, we're looking at local market sales. So that rate shouldn't be taken into account for our evaluation. We also consulted with neighboring jurisdictions. They also don't factor in the T-bill into their cap rate analysis. We don't feel that argument should be a lot of weight should be supported to that argument in this particular case. What we have found is that when we look at the cases upcoming cases, the gross potential income is not particularly used in a lot of these cases. They are providing an actual income, which does lower or projects a lower income than what should be projected for the property. And we just want you to understand that we're using a stabilized gross potential and vacancy when we are projecting these cases and projecting an effective gross income. I'll jump in if Rob has anything else that he needs for me to comment on.
Thank you. For this particular case, 4040 Fairfax, if we can turn to the summary page, this property has been leasing up year over year from 2019 at 46% vacant to 40% in 2020, 33% in 2021, and in 2022 they're at 26% vacant for the property. The original assessment did calculate a higher vacant square footage. We did make corrections to this case using the 2022 INE. And so we captured a 26%, 47,869 square feet to be exact, vacant for this property. You'll see that we did do a reconstruction for the 2022 INE. What the reconstruction represents is the added income that is potentially for this property based on that vacant square footage. So if you compare columns E to E1, you'll see that in column E, they didn't report the vacant income for that square footage. So what we did is we used in E1 the agent's inputted income to kind of demonstrate what the potential income of the property should be. If you scroll down to the NOI and compare E to E1, you'll see that there's a difference there. The main difference again is that 26% vacant income that the department imputed to give the board a general idea of what this projected income should be if you inputted that income of the 26% vacant square footage. When looking at the test in column F, the department used the rent roll to determine what were the leases in place. Based on that rent roll, the county found that for the leases in place, the average was $40.95 and retail was $46. You'll see that we did take out concessions for this property and we imputed a per square foot rate of $36.85 for leases in place, $34 for vacant square footage, and the rest of the retail at $46 a square foot. Almost similar to what the appellant has projected in column G1. You'll see that our figures are somewhat close. Only $2 off on the vacant square footage. Again, our vacant square footage was based on the new leases that were tenanted in this property. You'll see there that there is a 2023 lease. If you turn to the rent roll on the county's analysis, there's 5 2022 leases, and the average for those new leases was $37.97. Again, the county's using $34 to account for concessions for those leases. And overall, if you look at the NOI, you'll see that in the test column, the county did arrive at a slightly higher NOI compared to the original assessment. This is again to capture the added tenancy in the building. Again, the original assessment we captured at 59,253 square feet vacant. We did adjust for the test and lowered that based on the rent roll at 47,869 square foot vacant. And as a result of the test, we asked that the board confirm the original assessment at $55,133,700.
I just want to make one comment. I'm sorry. So I just want to reiterate that we value as of January 1. All the data that we use is through third quarter of the prior year. We do try to take into account any sales that occur after that quarter, but we never go back and readjust based on the market. If the market is increasing or if the market is tanking, we have never historically gone back and made adjustments to any cap rates. And that applies for any property class. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, Jordan, when you were talking about the 5 sales and the average cap rate, that was from a study, and you said 7.25%, but I'm assuming that's not with the tax rate loaded in, so the actual cap rate's probably like, 8.28 or something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
The 7.25 is the market unloaded. So you would add the tax rate of 1.2, whatever the bid is. So yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, for Jordan, what have other jurisdictions done regarding the cap rate for office buildings? Have any of them changed?
They have. Fairfax County did increase cap rates from 2022 to 2023. They increased cap rates by between 10 and 50 basis points this year. And they also apply a high vacancy adjustment to properties that have greater than 50 or greater than 75% vacancy.
If I could just, Jordan, I believe that the cap rate adjustment in Fairfax, if a property has a greater than 40% vacancy, the county increases the cap rate to reflect the risk. And they increase it by 125 basis points. And if the vacancy rate at the property is 75% or greater, they adjust the cap rate by increasing the cap rate by 175 basis points. Also, the city of Alexandria on appeal has been increasing office cap rates by 50 basis points. So Alexandria is a little bit more in tune with recognizing actually the cap rates associated with individual properties. But, so if there's a high vacancy rate property, it's going to have a higher cap rate. If there's a lot of capital improvements that are needed at the property, they'll have a higher capitalization rate. But again, on appeal, they've been going up 50 basis points.
Mr. Lawson?
Actually,
Let me ask Jordan.
can I comment on that last question, please?
Well, you can, but let me ask Jordan. I'm asking a follow-up, if you don't mind. So the vacancy in this went from 46 to 40 to 36 to 26%.
The vacancy, yes, 46, 36, 33, and now 26.
26, okay. What did the ownership do to encourage this leasing activity? Did they add amenities? Did they give great breaks on the rent? How did they do it?
I think it's one of the more affordable properties in the Ballston submarket. If you all are familiar with this building, it kind of stands out for its age and condition. It's the black building. It's in between J Soul on one side and the other side you have Bronson Beer Hall. So again, it was built in 1966, effective age assigned this year of 1981. So while I don't know specifically what their marketing program was, I would have to assume it's the affordability of the property that
Okay.
has. And the leases, I believe, have been shorter durations as well.
Mr. Lawson, the leases have gone to a shorter duration. The weighted average lease term or WALT at this property, Jordan, I think you said it was 3.6 years. So they've also increased concessions and the rental rates have declined to get people in the building.
Okay,
Can the county respond to those two questions?
that's what we're getting to right now.
Okay.
Ms. Peralta?
Yes, so with Fairfax County, they also lower the cap rate based on effective age as well, whereas the county has used a wider range to reflect the cap rate. So when you're looking at this property, to answer your second question, what have they done? They did amenitize the building. They did create spec suites, which would, lease up a lot faster than, just a vacant, what do you call it? A demised floor, if you will. So they did make these spaces readily available. They did take a lot of the imagination, if you will, out of the minds of the future tenants. They created spaces where they can kind of plug and play, so to speak. If you see, I added the CoStar report to this property. We have captured the effective age at 1981. You can see like they create a deck area. The bathrooms have been improved. The spec suites will give you a general idea of the picture of the spec suites on page 11 of 99. And when looking at this property and looking at our sales support our current cap rates. You see that there was no change when looking at our commercial guidelines. If the board remembers all the sales that were included, our assessment to sales ratio based on the last few years have been relatively low. And that is because although our cap rate didn't change, we did every year make adjustments to, the market rents that we're seeing based on the rent rolls, based on the feedback that we're receiving, even input from Eileen and Jordan saying, hey, take a look at concessions. So we added concessions one year because we were able to analyze those concessions because they were provided more in detail in the rent rolls. So from, as the board remembers, we increased from 6% to 10%. And now I believe Eileen and Jordan are pushing for 12% because that's what they're seeing in the current market. So, as we follow the market, we do make adjustments, and there's different ways to affect the value, as Jordan mentioned. You could change the market rent. You could change the vacancy.
You've addressed his. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
If I
Chairwoman,
may-
I'd like to address the,
Okay. Sorry,
if I could address the sales assessment ratio,
no,
because that was brought up and it's
I'm
new
sorry.
information.
can you mute her? I'm sorry. The questions are asked and answered. We're in questions now. You can make your comments.
I understand you allowed the department to respond.
To your comments, and we're done.
I'd
on-
like to
we're
respond
moving
to
along.
Mr. Peralta's
I acknowledge your
comments.
objection. We're done. Mr. Matzkin, did you have anything? Any other questions?
Comments. One minute wrap up.
Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, again, we're looking at this case. We do see that the NOI is justified based on the original assessment and our test. We did demonstrate what the INE should look like when projecting for all square foot of the property. When respect to the sales affecting the effective age and affecting the cap rate of this property, we are looking at all evidence to demonstrate exactly what these cap rates are. You'll see in future cases that we've asked for the appraisals when the property has sold. We did ask and emailed the appellant and the agents what these cap rates, what the purchase agreement was, and if we can get a copy of that, what the appraisals are, to kind of demonstrate what the cap rates have shown. As the board remembers, in our first 2 or 3 cases this year in office, there were appraisals attached to the cases, and the cap rates supported our current cap rates for these properties. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Deidre, did you have anything to add?
You're out of time.
No,
Mr.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. First off, we did not receive a request for a purchase agreement for this property or appraisals. That may be other properties Mr. Peralta is talking about. Now, as for the sales supporting the historical cap rates, that's simply not the facts on the ground. Look at 2 sales in particular. 675 North Randolph sold September of 2021. The cap rate at sale per the buyer, 6.14%. This property was assessed at a cap rate this year of 5.4%. That is not supported by the sale. 2900 Quincy Street sold October 2020 at a cap rate of 6.8%. The county has assessed it this year at 5.85%. These properties, it's important to note, are 96% and 100% occupied. Some of the best tenanted buildings in the county. Now, it's illustrative. There were 3 sales in December of 2022. So to test the DREA's guidelines, let's look at these sales that the county, by their own admission, did not have time to adjust to recognize the sale price. So we have 1805, 1840 Wilson Boulevard sold for $10.5 million, December 16th of last year. 2023 assessment, $21.3 million, a 200% assessment to sale ratio. 1776 Wilson sold, was assessed this year at 115% of the sale price, And 2445 Army Navy Drive, sold in December of last year, assessed at 140% of the sale price using the county's guidelines. Clearly, the guidelines are not reflective of the market.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. Mr. Hoffman.
I'm sitting here watching an auction for a very similar office building in Tyson's, walking distance to Spring Hill Metro. The current bid is $70 a square foot and it ends in 1 hour. So, I mean, we're in July, 7 months from January, but I just want to put that data point out there. Very similar, 71% occupied, 1986 office, credit tenants. Okay, $70 a square foot. This property now the department has assessed at $297 a square foot. The issue I had that I pointed out with the county on the Corpaz cap rate study is that he completed that study in spring and summer of last year, published it in August with the date of valuation of January 1st, 2023. So he was looking forward into the future, into his crystal ball. And I'm going to use SOFR because that's what real estate lending is based on now. But SOFR was 1.9% in August when he published the report, and it was in January 23, it was 4.1%, which is a difference of 2.2 or 220 basis points. So this cap rate argument is very real. If you point to the Corpaz report, it is a dated report as of January 1st. I suggested that the county get him to amend it and update it on January 1st, and then we wouldn't be having these arguments. We would go with the Corpaz report, but they declined to do that. So I'm somewhat inclined to go with I mean, if you take 2.2 and add it to the 7.2 cap rate that Peter Corpaz recommended, you're at 9.4. But I do know that real estate lags interest rates. And so I'm kind of looking at an 8.5 because I think Jordan's sale comps support that. So if I put an 8.5 cap on this thing, I come up with 46,423,900, which I think is still too high, but it's $250 a square foot, and I think it's going to come down again next year.
Okay, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I did something kind of similar, and I guess I'm going to say that for the years I've been on this board, I've heard the arguments from property owners about why their property is not worth what it's assessed at, and then it sells 2 months after we had the hearing for more than what the assessed value was. But this is different, and I think that the world has changed. And you know, I read the material that was supplied. I read it again this morning, and I think the county is just disassociated from reality in this with the office situation. This particular property has trended. It's gone from 46 to 26%. So what I looked at was an 8.2 cap. I ended up at 49, 921, 726. So I guess the first thing as a board, Madam Chairman, I'm going to suggest, is there a majority that is willing to alter the cap rate? I guess that's the first thing I'll throw out.
For this building or for all buildings?
I think it's got to be for all.
All.
Mr.
It can be appeal,
Yeah.
barring anything else.
I mean, it's a fatal flaw with the Corpaz report. That's the issue. We all talk about January 1st as the date of valuation, but he made the report on August 1st.
You know, one of the things that I found that was really interesting is somewhere it said that if a lease has a termination date, lenders are assuming it will in fact terminate. They're not thinking, oh, they'll probably renew. They're assuming they're going to terminate and vacate. It's what I found persuasive. That happened in my own building.
And they're not looking at potential income. They're looking at what's your actual income right now. Yeah, I mean, that's the other issue.
I agree with that, but do lenders adopt mass appraisal techniques of we don't predict the future, we only go by the date of valuation? I mean, isn't that akin to home appraisals for mortgage lenders versus departmental municipal appraisals for a tax? I mean, I think it's apples to pears.
Right, but the lender would look at an appraisal.
We're looking at something different. I'm really sympathetic to this because I just, being in the field, I just can't imagine that we're going to go back to office vacancy and maybe retail vacancy at the 2018 levels, 19 levels.
Yeah.
But mass appraisal talks about trends and stability. This is, I know, weak rule for appellants, but to just pick out cap rates because they kind of feel smart, and they might be smart, but based on no rigorous analysis makes me very, on our part, makes me very uncomfortable. And I'm hoping that this whole new steady state of how much office space is going to be absorbed and built, and I'm still seeing some built, I just can't even believe it.
No.
I mean, the borrow
I-
rate on January 1st, if you finance this office building, would be probably 7.25% would be your interest rate.
No, it's very high, but in the
It's
residential
higher
market,
than the cap rate.
we don't see, the mortgage rates of residential went up 250% or something in the last year. But we don't see a 250% or a 50% reduction in home sales.
True. It's not income
It's
producing.
not a one for one.
Yeah, that's not income producing property.
And it's not 50% vacant.
Right.
50% of the single family homes.
Well, I'm also very sensitive to fair market value being equal to, or their contention is greater than the numbers, the I&E sheet. But picking.
So yours is the
Very-
logic of how we arrive at what that number would be if it's adjusted.
Well, say it again.
Your concern is the logic of how we come to the number if we're adjusting it.
Sure, I mean, the department's contention is that we not only look at core packs, which I clearly make the case is weak rule in such a dynamic economy that we've had last year. But they say we're looking at all sales, which aren't a lot, but that's what you look at to get a cap rate. What are people paying per square foot for this kind of building? And the department defends themselves in a logical way. And I'm really sympathetic to everything you've said. I mean, I'm not blowing up.
But Ken, the examples that the applicant showed are like over 90% leased.
I don't know if you can cherry pick. I mean, the department, if I were the department, I'd say, yeah, but I don't look at 4 sales. I look at every sale that's happened in the last 18 months. And that's what I come up with.
But there's not that many sales.
And you can't sell a building if you got a note on it and it hasn't gone through foreclosure yet and the price is below what the debt is on the building. So it just doesn't sell, right? You got
Sure, we've seen that.
4601 North Fairfax that is trying to find somebody to pay $100 a square foot for and they can't find. So that we're not going to see that sale until who knows when. It'll go into pre-foreclosure, foreclosure, and the lender's going to take it over. We won't see that sale comp until the markets come back up, but we know the value's been hit.
Well, and we don't necessarily have to change the entire cap rate for all buildings. Comfortable.
For appellants,
Yeah.
as Mark said, you agree with that?
Pardon me?
It's for appellants only. who-
Right,
who-
or
who argue
at this
that.
point, well, then you get into a whole equalization issue.
Yeah,
That's right, that's where I was going.
You got to look at every building too. There's a big difference between a 100% net lease to Amazon property and with 20 years of term on it, and multi-tenant where you got a couple of campaign marketing companies that are going to be out of here after the next election anyway, and things like that. Marymount just built their new building, right? And how long are they going to stay here? Market's going to look at that and say, I'm going to discount that lease. So
I think Katie picked the right time to leave.
Mr. Pietrangelo, where are you on this?
Well, historically, we haven't made any changes, and I feel confident that, the county has always done their homework to come up with cap rates. It's not like they just ignore it and try to see, it's a lot of the comparisons I'm hearing, it's from, looking at other jurisdictions that we normally don't see, even DC that is so close to Arlington, we don't even look at, what they do over there or what cap rates are. And, the value itself, is it lower than previous years? I don't think so. I think the vacancy has, like they showed, is not going down. But I feel I'm okay with the current assessment the way it is and the cap rate.
I'd like to add on to.
Go ahead, Mr. Matzke.
So it makes yet again another good point. We're comparing this building to this building. And was it 4.3%, 4.8% increase? That seemed high to me. It's the first thing I look at. But they've done they've done what they needed to do to keep this building viable. I would prefer maybe a 1% increase, but it's not a 20% decrease based on the Fed funds rate. It just isn't. And
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
okay, so you bring back the last case where I said, well, we know the answer. The NOI ought to be pretty much like it was before, so we just plug in the questions. What's the operating expenses? What's the revenue? What's this? But in this case, I am doing that.
Mm-hmm.
See what they had to do though, Ken, because one of the questions I asked is, what did you do to get that?
Yeah.
Get that occupied?
And they did
Shorter leases,
Yeah.
lots of concessions.
Sure, campaign but so in December of 2024, some double-digit vacancy is going to occur because of the nature of the tenant. Aren't we supposed to worry about that then? I feel very uncomfortable predicting.
But that's not how lenders are analyzing. Lenders are analyzing.
And we should have started whenever the BOE was created 60 years ago or whatever. We should just go to get a bunch of commercial realtors to sit down and forget about everybody else and just what do they think it's going to be.
No, you're exaggerating what I'm saying. I'm saying that the world is different now. And when you go to get the financing, it's not like it was.
Because
it's different in the sense that tenants are contracting, tenants are vacating. You're not, this particular building has gone down in vacancy, but I think that's an exception. And it's an exception based on what they did.
Then why would make the exception to increase their cap rate? Again, I agree. They did what they needed to do to stay viable.
And they don't have the long-term solution.
In 2 years, it could go down by 50% because it's a wasteland.
And we'll adjust ours.
That's a
So,
cap rate.
Yeah, I guess we need to.
So where, okay, we
Ask
got
on cap rate.
numbers out here. We got 54 million.
I'm okay with that 8.5 cap. I don't think or if 8.2, it makes everybody more comfortable. It's a little bit higher than what I would think this is.
And you would change this cap rate because why? For this building,
Opinion of value on the building.
in your value.
Yeah. This is,
So at 8.2, but it's come out to.
that was Barnes's number. He came out with
I
49.
put it 49,921,700. I wouldn't mind if that was double checked. What I did is I took the test and then applied the 8.2 because I thought the figures were good. I think all the figures the county did were good. I just think the cap rate's wrong.
Did you take the below the line deductions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I used the 193,700.
Are you checking that?
Okay. I can double check it too. Oh, by the way, can we get those bigger sheets again? Because I can barely read these numbers.
Okay, that's.
For some reason, they couldn't clean up a landscape to get it along that.
Yeah.
Are we doing-
Yeah, I got the same number.
And we're looking at this building, not,
You okay?
I'm just going to throw this out. I know there's consensus that okay.
No, I don't know if there's, that's what I'm saying. I mean, otherwise it reverts. All right, go
I
ahead.
just can say they've improved the building. They've increased their vacancy. I'm sorry, increased their vacancy outlook, namely it's smaller.
Vacancy went down.
And and we're diminishing the value of the building. That doesn't. It's a better
That's what they
building with more revenue, and we're saying the building's worth less.
Shows how important
It's not like that, doesn't it? Pardon me?
shows how important interest rates are to the real estate market. You understand that, right, Annette?
Okay. All right,
That's a good retort.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Mr. Lawson,
Should I go ahead and make a motion, Madam Chair? I make a motion that we reduce the assessed value to 49,921,700 based upon an adjustment to the test column, which is number F, and utilize an 8.2 cap rate versus the 7.
okay, motion second by Mr. Hoffman, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is 5-1 without Mr. Panoranda. The assessments reduced to 49,921,700 based on column F and a cap rate of 8.2. Thank you. Okay, next case on the agenda is RPC 20031-007 at 200 North Glebe. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, thank you. 200 North Glebe. This property is located at Glebe Road. It's just north of the intersection of Highway 50. If you're familiar with this area, there's a car wash across the street, some various low-rise retail. So this building kind of sticks out on its own at this location. It was built in 1970, and the issues on appeal, the imputed rent, the operating expenses, and the capitalization rate. And vacancy did increase at this property year over year. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, and she's going to delve into the issues a little further. Thank you.
So I'm going to just initially focus on the capitalization rate guidelines that the department used. And in their guidelines, they state that there are a number of factors that were used to develop the cap rates. One was market sales. And in the board, in the county's guidelines, they list a number of sales. There are two, as Jordan mentioned, and I just want to re-emphasize that. The first two sales are the only sales that took place after capitalization rate, after interest rates started to increase. And the first sale, which was the National Science Teachers Building, was assessed at a rate, the initial 2023 assessment was 201% greater than the sale price. The county has since gone back and reduced that assessment, but it shows based on the initial 201% assessment sale ratio that the guidelines do not produce an assessment in accordance with fair market value. The second sale, and they actually went back and decreased that assessment by 24%. The second sale, 1776 Wilson, which took place in October, had an assessment sale ratio of 115%, again showing that the assessment guidelines are broken. They don't work in this changed market. Once again, the county went back and reduced that assessment and reduce that assessment. So next year, when we see the guidelines or we see the office sales, you'll be seeing those assessments at a reduced rate, and it will appear that the assessment sale ratio was closer to correct. The sales that are used by the county and by Mr. Corpax, and I'll just go through a few of them in a little bit more detail. What we have is a situation in which properties that are tenanted by defense contractors or mission critical or secured buildings are more valuable now because those tenants can't work from home. So those buildings are basically a carve out. And in Arlington County, that would include the sale of Founders Square, 675 North Randolph. which sold at a cap rate of 6.14% pursuant to the owner, and the county is and 6.14% being the market cap, and the county assessed it in 2023 using a capitalization rate of 5.4%. So full 74% basis points lower than the sale cap rate. The owner of that building is an investment fund. That investment fund specializes and invests in, its criteria are government tenanted buildings, and there is a set rate of return in that fund. This building fit that rate of return and tenant occupancy, and that is why this building was bought by them. And even with those lower rates of return requirements, they still are at a 6.14, while the county is valuing it as a 5.4. Now, we did speak with the owner and the seller of that building, and the owner said that as of January 1 of this year, they would have valued it at a 6.89% rate to a 7.14% rate. The seller believes they would get if they were going to the market, they would get an 8% rate. Another sale that the county references is Sequoia Plaza. And Sequoia Plaza is 2100, 2110, and 2120 Washington Boulevard. That sale took place in 21. And again, this was to Boyd Watterson, and this was for a different investment fund that they have. And this sale, at the time of sale, was 99% occupied by Arlington County. And the purchase cap rate was a 5.34%. Again, that fund was formed prior to the change in the financial markets and had a lower required rate of return than most investors. The WALT on that sale, or the weighted average lease term, was 9.72%. So you have a well-tenanted property that's 99% occupied with almost 10 years of lease term left. The owners of that property said that they would pay for that property on January 1, 2023, between 6.09 and 6.34%. The county is slightly lower on that property, but this seems to be the property on which the guidelines are built. So if you have what I'll call a unicorn property, a property with 10 years of weighted average lease term or WALT left, you might pay someplace around 6.09 to 6.34 in terms of the cap rate. Another Arlington sale, again, we've mentioned it, 2900 Quincy, was purchased, and Jordan indicated, at a 6.8% cap rate. As of January 1, the buyer of that property would not buy it for less than a 9% cap rate. And the seller of that property did not believe that if they took it to market on January 1, they would be able to sell it for anything less than a 9.4 to a 9.8% cap rate. The county used a 5.85% market cap to value this property, almost a full 100 basis points below the rate that was used in purchasing it. Another sale the county references is 1400 Crystal, which sold at a 5.7% cap rate. The purchaser of that property says as of January 1, the most they would have paid would be based on a 7.5% cap rate. And the county valued it at a 5.392% cap rate. At the time of sale, that property was 92% leased with a 5.61 WALT. So in short, the sales referenced in CorePax's study had a 95% occupancy rate and a weighted average lease term, or WALT, of 7 years. The county also says in their guidelines that they used that their rates were based on the financial markets. We have asked repeatedly what in the financial markets supports their capitalization rate, and we've received no response. during our hearings, we've asked about the cap rates, and we've been told no discussion will be had on the cap rates. In fact, we've asked for meetings on the cap rates, and that has not occurred. So the financial markets do tell a story, and Jordan went through the Fed rates and he went through SOFR, and something that does occur on a daily basis is properties are repriced by the financial markets every single day. And those are in real estate investment trusts that are traded. And local real estate investment trusts, such as JBG Smith, went down 35% over the year. Brandywine went down 56% over the year. Boston Properties, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry?
I need you to wrap up, please. The time's expired.
Okay. The other item that I will mention is that the department states that they referenced publications in our board book.
I'm going to cut you off there. Thank you, Ms. Mormon.
Thank you,
Mr.
ma'am.
The county, please.
I'm going to
Okay,
actually, Rob, let me just speak for a
Sure.
second.
Sure.
So I just want to go back a little bit and just talk about the guidelines and how they're developed every year. We are actually using market sales that occur approximately 12 months behind the market. So there is a lag. We are using the mass appraisal approach to valuing these properties. Our guidelines are developed using actual income and expense data that is reported from each property class. That information is that we use for the 2023 guidelines was 2021 INE information. So there is a lag. Everything we do, we understand that there is a lag in what we do. And we do not take into account additional information or 2022 information unless a property is under appeal. Some of the properties that were brought up that show that there was a change in value were due to additional information that was provided. Our information, our guidelines, we feel very confident in our information because we are taking that information exactly from the properties themselves. The county has had several conversations with the agent regarding the cap rate. We have eventually decided that we chose not to make any changes to the cap rate, make any adjustments to the cap rate for 2023, and there was no need to have further discussions for the cap rate. It was discussed with the director 2 times, with me 1 time, and with several other appraisers. So to just say that we haven't had a cap rate discussion isn't actually fair. I do want to also note that some of the office sales that we are using office sales prior to the analysis period. And we are also looking at cap rates based on the information that was available prior to January 1. The agent is asking us to take into account factoring in people's feelings and what they feel the property was valued, should be valued, the cap rate should be assessed after January 1. And I just want to make sure that we are pointing those things out. Sorry, Rob, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to concentrate mainly on the sales. If the board has any direct questions regarding this property, I'm open to answer any specific details you may see between the test and, the original assessment compared to what the appellant has shown in their pro forma. With respect to the sales for the office guidelines, the National Science Teachers Foundation sale at 201% assessment sales ratio, that is slated for redevelopment. So we're looking at that, and that included 2 standalone retail buildings. So that is slated for a redevelopment. I believe it's an apartment building. So that sale isn't a true office sale, if you so to speak. When you look at 1776 Wilson, that did come before my review this year, we did make adjustments. That sale, we did request the appraisal. It was not provided. If it was compelling to say that there was a cap rate issue, that would have justified any cap rate questions that the board may have. Unfortunately, it didn't go to the board. We did make an adjustment. The sale that Ms. Borman didn't point out is 1300 Wilson, and that was at 57% assessment and sales ratio. So when we're talking about, when the appellant and Ms. Borman and Jordan are talking about these cap rates, these cap rates, judging on these two sales that occurred in the county, 1776 Wilson and 1300 Wilson, and again, 1400 Crystal Drive came in at 65% assessment of sales ratio. So although our cap rates didn't change, what the sales did show from last year is that we should have reduced our cap rates. So again, we do follow the market. We do wait until, cap rates have adjusted in the sales. Now, if the current market is and the current climate is saying that there's a 20% decrease in the sales or the assessments of properties, we would love to see those sales come in. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So when the board is teetering between 8.2% and 8.5% on the last case, we don't have that liberty to make adjustments. Minute is that from property to property, we again are doing mass appraisal based on the information that's provided to the county. It's not changed over the years. I'll go further and show that we did ask the appellants for 875 North Randolph, 4001 North Fairfax, 1100 North Glebe are up on appeal for this year. We did ask for the purchase agreements. We did ask for the appraisals. Nothing has been submitted to the county thus far. I have emails to show, and I will include that in these cases, in the future cases that come before you. Again, when we're looking at the Sequoia sales, what Ms. Borman didn't elect to tell the board is that we came in at 89% sales to assessment ratio on one of the buildings, 62% assessment to sales ratio on another building. And on the third Sequoia Plaza, we're at 55% assessment to sales ratio. So, I'll point to our guidelines. I'll show if the board wishes to see a copy of, our guidelines. I have it on my screen if they want to see exactly what those ratios are and how it compares to the actual sales that came in. Again, although we didn't change the cap rates, we do make adjustments across the board, from the vacancy adjustments to the concessions. And, we wonder if our cap rates are supported with these sales, what kind of rents are they using when they appraise these properties? If our rents are, much lower than what they're using, then that's why our assessments are supported. That's why our cap rates are supported. They may be using a higher rent per square foot. They may make adjustments that we don't typically see. I mean, based on whatever climate or the appellant is suggesting that we're in, we have sympathy with respect to what is happening. But as a county, as our government body, we don't have the ability to adjust on the fly. We don't have the ability to make cap rates based on hearsay, based on opinions of property owners that suggest, when led by the appellant to suggest what the cap rate may be and what their current climate is. We ask the board to really consider and really look at the sales that the county has researched over the years, and really weigh that the impact of what making an adjustment to cap rate will do to our assessments. Thank you.
I just want to also add that the Corpax report is just a reference. I know it was brought up in the original case, in the first case, but that's one reference that the county used. We also rely on publications and the actual market sales that we analyze. That is one reference. Additionally, Corpax study has also indicated that we lower cap rates. We continue to keep our cap rates consistent. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this is for Jordan or Eileen. We have the operating year 2022. The NOI is $3,381,363. In column H, you have lowered that to $2,736,025. What's happened to justify that lowered amount?
Yes, sir. So first off, column E includes $150,000 in miscellaneous income. That is an insurance reimbursement that goes to a capital expense for a switchgear replacement. So if you look at the prior 3 years, across all 3 years, there's only $140 in miscellaneous income. So that's an error on the DREA's part to include that in the capitalized value. That's a one-time insurance reimbursement and goes straight to capital expenses. It's not going to be repeatable.
The county didn't include it.
So on the column E 2022 open year, it is miscellaneous row 6. So E6 shows 150,000 in miscellaneous income. That's insurance reimbursement as listed on the I&E. The DREA was aware of that, and that's what that is. You can see again, 19, 20, 21, total miscellaneous income, $140, so less than $50 a year. So that is an outlier, so that's part of it. Additionally, the owner reports net income, so stabilizing it for vacancy reduces it, and we also increase the operating expenses.
Also, Mr. Lawson, this building has leases in it that have concessions that take place not during the first year of the lease, and which is actually pretty smart and I think we're seeing it more. There are concessions in years 2, year 3, year 4, etc. So the rental rate that we used moving forward reflects a stabilized concession rate of 10% across the board. And those concessions, as I said, I think there were, Jordan, correct me, please. I think there were 3 new leases signed with very significant free rent periods that are, in fact, one was over 20%, that are moving forward.
All right, thank you. Other questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I think it was Jordan that mentioned this, the Syfax building. Did you say that was a 5.34 cap to Boyd, or was that 6.34?
Mr. Hoffman, which building was that again?
The Sequoia.
Sequoia. The owner told us the cap rate at sale was 5.34, and again, that was a specific investment fund, so that likely.
Okay, you don't have to, Eileen, you don't have to jump in. I understand
Okay.
it's a single tenant Arlington lease building. It doesn't really apply. So I just wanted to get the number right.
Anything else?
County should have bought it probably.
And when was the DARPA building sold? That was 21, right?
September 9th of 2021,
Okay.
yes, sir.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Penaranda? Anything? No? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, that DARPA building was sold at 99% of our assessment value there, Greg. When looking at this property, again, we're looking at our original assessment was lower than what they projected in the last 3 years, 2022, 2021, and 2020. Our test column were almost $477,000 lower than what they reported in 2022. This is accounting again for the concessions, for the vacancy, and we made adjustments based on that. You see what the appellants is showing, $645,000 lower than what they reported in 2022, $320,000 lower than 2021, $260,000 lower than 2020. Obviously, there's a disconnect between what this property could potentially make if they're making an argument on cap rate. Again, we're going back and we're looking at what the assessment and sales ratio would show based on the sales value that occurred during the assessment periods in the last few years.
All right.
Again, all the sales would show that we should lower the assessment and lower our cap rates.
All righty,
Thank
thank you. Mr. Harmon, you have a minute to wrap up. Please keep it to the minute.
Actually, I'll wrap up. So in terms of this case, the biggest issue is obviously the cap rate. And we believe that the market has clearly stated that cap rates are higher than the amount that the county used. Given the changes in the financial markets, given the verifications of the sales, given the January 1 updates to the sales, And given the sales that occurred after the Fed started raising rates, and the fact that the county's values were 115% greater on 1776 and 140% greater on 2445, clearly 2445 Army Navy, this clearly indicates that the guideline capitalization rates are broken. Their rates are also much lower than the rate. They're lower than the rates their cap rates are lower than the rates at the time of sale for all of the sales, those 5 sales, with the exception of 1. I also take umbrage.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm gonna cut you off here. I don't know if you guys cannot hear these timers, but you're on.
We can't hear the timer.
Okay, well, thank you, you're finished. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. I'm going to share with Rob that here's the problem with what the county's done. And let's say you own a building and you have a loan on it. Let's say it's worth 100 million and your loan is 95 million. And you want to sell it, but the market will not pay you more than 80 million. You're not going to sell it. You're going to hold it. You're going to hope like hell that the economy comes back before that note's due. And if it doesn't, then you're going to deed it back in lieu of foreclosure, or the bank's going to foreclose or whatever. And so you're not seeing sales that prove that your cap rate's wrong, because they're not being sold, because the lender won't discount the loan. So I want to share with you that that's the reality that everybody has that you're not seeing. Now,
No, I do see that.
no, I'm not.
I'm sorry,
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Lawson, you should actually be talking to the board.
Yeah, the second thing that I'll share is that I took the operating year, and I'm not sure this is necessarily a cap rate case, but anyhow, I took the operating year and I reduced it by that 150. And then I applied a 10% cap rate and ended up at 32,313,600. Then I applied a 9% cap rate, which was the compromise we ended up last case, and it ended up at 37,570. So unless there's others on the board that think we should go to a 10 cap rate, I think where the county is appropriate.
You're supporting column D. When all said and done.
Yeah, the 35 million, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought if
Go ahead,
it
Mr.
was gonna be anything, it'd be a modest reduction, because I kind of feel the same about being okay with the 8 cap on this building.
Why is that?
I knew you'd ask. The key difference is this is 2.5 acres in Arlington. And so
Parking lot and all.
2.5 acres in Arlington means you've got a mission critical diocese tenanted building that can carry this thing until it can be redeveloped. So the market would look at this as, I don't need a huge return. I can buy it at an 8 cap and redevelop this thing and put residential or whatever on it in the future. But you can't do that with the other sites that are in Boston that are so tiny.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Mr. Metzger?
I've been struggling since before this assessment season, equalization season started, on the concept that state law and judiciary findings give a lot of weight to fair market value, especially when it's way off from number of crunching and getting assessments. And I can't figure it out. And this particular case helped me a lot, I think. I'm not sure there's anything I heard that was new, but I got to gel it. And one of them is the time lag function. We see that a lot in residential. And we say out loud to ourselves, well, nobody complains when, you know, the market's getting soft and it's time lag. They only complain when it's getting, you know, time lag where it built up. And so over time, things kind of adjust themselves. The essence of mass appraisal, of course, is trends over time. And we talk about that a lot. It's pretty new. And vis-a-vis the fair market value argument of, well, on January 1st, this is what it would sell for, discounting what the buyers think it's going to sell for. That's not hardcore. But when they actually pay money, that counts. I take that seriously, but I don't know how the department could possibly in December of each year, I'll give them not one day, but an entire month, go through the fair market values and all the nuances, 6,300 commercial properties and another, whatever it is, 50,000 residential properties. It's probably 60,000 by now. And so I continue, and so I don't think it's an accident that mass appraisal depends on time lags and trends, and it's very cumbersome, and it's like a train, it takes a while to stop, but eventually it'll get there. It's easy to legislate and find from the judiciary point of view, no, it's fair market value, because that's really what it's going to trade for. I'm very sympathetic to that, but I'd like to see them figure out how to do that other than through time lags and trends. So I'm getting really, having voted for the increase last time, only in the last case, only because something that Tom said. Yeah, no, it was very cogent. But I've now gelled to the fact that this is a cumbersome train, and that's what we got to do. And I'm not changing any cap rates for anybody anymore.
You voted for a decrease.
Yeah.
Well, no, I voted.
Oh, he's talking about the cap rate. I got it, yeah.
Yeah, the cap rate. I voted for an increase in the cap rate. I did, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, not decrease in the assessment. Sorry, it wasn't. So, but I found my inner peace.
And I just want to say to Rob's point, when he's kind of given the tables and the things to work with, he only has a limited amount of leeway, and I appreciate that for sure. It's up at the higher levels of the county where they need to figure out some of these other cases where there's distress in the market and how to properly value these things and empower their agents to properly value these things, because he does a good job of pulling it. I mean, these packages are great. Rob and Deirdre and everybody that's pulling these things together, you can get a real good picture of the building. It's just the underlying capital markets that are completely upside down right now.
And these guys, they don't do what we do. I mean, you and I negotiate with lenders, and we know we know the trials and tribulations of owners of office buildings, what they're going through now, and they don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, these cases are going to come to us to make those kind of decisions. And I wish that some of them could be kind of handled at another level. Yeah. To be honest. Yeah.
I think it's quite often I'm impressed with how well I think the county does in analyzing these numbers and bringing them up to where they were last year. And really, their projections are good. Maybe a tweak here and there, but the numbers are working. And the other thing, and I made a note of it, that lag time, it's the same as we do on the residential. I agree.
No, it's the same lag time we've had for
It's,
years.
I know, but then we've done adjusted cap rates
Right.
because of it. And I understand that this is what the market's doing differently right now that we hadn't dealt with 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we're here for, is the equalization and
On a case by case basis.
yeah. I'm good.
Why don't I, Madam Chair? I'll go ahead and make a motion that we confirm the current assessed value at $35,572,300, and I'm going to base that upon based upon the actual income as has been reported.
All right, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Against? So that's unanimous. The county is confirmed at 35,572,300. Thank you.
2017 is.
All right, that completes-
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board and county.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you all.
And okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other business? Board members? No. Okay, then we will stand adjourned at 10:40. Reconvene next Wednesday, August 2nd at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
pipeline coming up in the session. Vacancies still being